Freedom beyond hunger, a Buddha reflection. Sometimes I notice how quickly my mind reaches for something else. Another distraction, another answer. Another promise that peace is just one more step away. And yet, even after getting what I thought I wanted, a quiet restlessness still remained beneath the surface. The Buddha understood this hunger deeply, not as weakness, but as the suffering of a mind that has forgotten it is already enough. In this reflection, we explore the hungry ghost inside all of us. The endless craving for certainty, control, love, and relief. And the quiet freedom that begins the moment we stop running from ourselves. Because beneath every craving, there may be something far more important waiting to be seen. The hunger beneath the noise. There are moments when you can feel it quietly moving beneath your ordinary routines. You finish one task and immediately reach for another. You check your phone without needing to. You replay conversations long after they end. Even in peaceful moments, some restless part of the mind keeps searching for the next thing that might finally bring relief. The Buddha saw this restlessness clearly. Not as failure and not as weakness, but as a deep habit of reaching beyond the present moment. Convinced something essential is always somewhere else. You may notice it most in quiet rooms. When the noise fades and nothing urgent remains, the mind begins wandering toward what is missing. More certainty, more love, more control. More reassurance that life will unfold the way you hoped. Yet the harder the mind grasps, the more tension quietly enters the body, like a hand clenching around water. The Buddha compared this hunger to a fire that feeds itself. Not because desire itself is evil, but because unconscious craving can never truly rest. Like waves chasing the shoreline, it keeps returning, asking for completion from things that cannot stay. And still, underneath all this movement, something in you already knows another way is possible. You have felt it in rare moments when nothing needed to change for peace to appear. A slow breath by a window, rain against the roof. A conversation where nobody was trying to win. In those moments, the hunger softened, not because life became perfect, but because awareness stopped running away from itself. The ghost that keeps reaching. The old Buddhist stories speak of the hungry ghost. A being with an enormous stomach and a tiny throat, forever searching yet never satisfied. The Buddha used this image because he understood something deeply human. Craving promises relief, but often creates more emptiness. The more the mind believes fulfillment lives outside itself, the more exhausting life becomes. You can see this pattern in modern life everywhere. A person works endlessly toward success only to feel strangely hollow when achievement finally arrives. Someone longs for love, then becomes terrified of losing it once it appears. Another keeps consuming information, entertainment, or distraction, hoping the next thing will finally quiet the unease inside. Yet the unease remains, because the deeper hunger was never truly about the object itself. The Buddha did not ask people to hate desire. He simply invited careful observation. What happens after the excitement fades? What remains after the mind finally gets what it wanted? Often there is only another reaching, another movement toward the next imagined solution. This is why craving becomes tiring. It turns life into an endless negotiation with the future. But awareness changes the relationship entirely. The moment you notice craving without obeying it, something subtle opens. There is suddenly space between the impulse and the action. In that small pause, the Buddhist teaching becomes alive, not as philosophy, but as direct experience. You begin seeing that you are not the hunger itself. You are the awareness capable of meeting the hunger gently. The space before reaction. Peace begins when the mind no longer rushes to complete itself through grasping. Most suffering does not arrive all at once. It builds through tiny unconscious movements repeated day after day. A thought appears and the body tightens around it. Fear rises and the mind immediately searches for control. Loneliness appears and distraction rushes in to cover it. The Buddha understood that the deepest transformation often begins not in dramatic moments, but in very small pauses. Imagine standing in your kitchen late at night, opening the refrigerator without hunger, searching for comfort in taste because the heart feels unsettled, or replaying an argument in your mind, shaping imaginary conversations that never bring resolution. These moments seem ordinary, yet they quietly reveal the entire structure of craving. The mind believes relief must come from changing something outside the discomfort. But sometimes, if you pause before reacting, something unexpected happens. The feeling moves, the tightness shifts. The wave rises and falls on its own. Like watching wind move through tall grass, you begin noticing that emotions are not solid objects. They are movements of experience, changing constantly when they are not resisted or fed. This is why the Buddha placed such importance on awareness itself. Awareness interrupts the trance of automatic living. It reveals that suffering often grows stronger through unconscious struggle. And slowly, through repeated observation, you begin trusting that not every discomfort needs to be solved immediately. Some experiences simply need space enough to unfold and pass. Love without possession. Craving shapes not only your relationship with objects or success, but also your relationship with people. The mind can easily turn love into a subtle form of grasping. You may begin needing others to behave a certain way so you can feel secure. You may cling to affection, attention, reassurance, or approval, believing these things guarantee safety. Yet the tighter the grip becomes, the more fragile love begins to feel. The Buddha saw that suffering often enters relationships through the fear of loss. We try to hold people still inside changing worlds. But no person can permanently protect another from uncertainty, aging, change, or sorrow. When love becomes possession, both people begin carrying invisible pressure. Real care feels different. It allows breathing room. It recognizes that every person walks their own path of longing and awakening. You stop demanding that others complete your inner emptiness. Instead, love becomes shared presence. Like two trees growing beside the same river, connected by the same earth while still rooted separately. This shift changes ordinary interactions. You listen more carefully because you are no longer preparing defenses. You apologize more honestly because identity matters less than understanding. Even conflict softens because you stop treating discomfort as proof that something is broken. The Buddha's way does not remove human pain, but it removes the extra suffering created by clinging to fixed expectations. Becoming a calm presence. When fear spreads through families, communities, or entire societies, the craving mind becomes highly contagious. People begin grasping for certainty, control, blame, or quick solutions. Anxiety moves from person to person like sparks through dry grass. The Buddha understood that unexamined fear rarely stays personal. It shapes how humans speak, consume, react, and treat one another. Yet something else also spreads quietly through human beings: calm, presence, steadiness. You have likely felt this around certain people before. Someone enters a tense room without adding more panic. They do not deny difficulty, but they are not consumed by it either. Their nervous system reminds others that clarity is still possible. This is why meeting your own craving mind with awareness becomes an offering to the world. Every moment you interrupt panic instead of feeding it, you reduce suffering beyond yourself. Every time you pause before reacting in anger, listen before assuming, or breathe before grasping for control, you change the emotional atmosphere around you. The Buddha never separated inner awakening from collective well-being. A peaceful mind influences the environment around it naturally, like still water reflecting light clearly. This does not mean becoming passive or detached from injustice. It means acting without desperation. The difference matters deeply. Actions born from panic often create more confusion. Actions born from grounded awareness create space for wisdom. The wealth of enough. The deepest form of wealth is the heart that no longer believes something is missing. Modern culture constantly teaches the mind to feel incomplete. There is always another achievement to chase, another improvement to make, another version of yourself to become. The Buddha recognized this endless striving as a source of quiet suffering. Not because growth is wrong, but because the mind often seeks worth through endless becoming. There is a particular exhaustion that comes from believing peace will finally arrive later. After more success, after more recognition, after life becomes more certain. Yet the future keeps moving, and the feeling of insufficiency quietly follows along. Contentment does not mean giving up ambition or responsibility. It means the heart stops building its entire identity around acquisition. You continue working, creating, loving, and participating in life, but not from desperation. The Buddha described this as freedom from thirst. The outer life may still remain active, yet inwardly there is less grasping. You begin noticing small forms of abundance that craving once overlooked. A quiet morning, shared laughter, the feeling of sunlight through a window, the relief of honesty after pretending for too long. None of these experiences can be owned permanently, yet they nourish something deeper than consumption ever could. This is the strange paradox the Buddha pointed toward. When the mind stops chasing completion so aggressively, life begins to feel unexpectedly complete already. Not perfect, not permanent, simply sufficient in this moment. Meeting suffering directly. When craving loosens its grip, another layer of experience often rises into view. Underneath distraction, ambition, and endless reaching, there is sometimes unprocessed sorrow waiting quietly in the body. Many people spend years outrunning this deeper ache through busyness, entertainment, or control. But eventually life slows enough for the hidden grief to surface. The Buddha never taught that suffering was a mistake. He taught that suffering becomes transformative when it is understood instead of resisted. Like dark soil nourishing seeds beneath the surface, pain can reveal unexpected wisdom when it is met honestly. You may notice how suffering changes when it is finally acknowledged directly. A person grieving loss stops pretending to be fine and suddenly feels the body soften slightly. Someone overwhelmed by fear finally speaks the truth aloud and discovers relief in simple honesty. The Buddha understood that hidden suffering grows heavier in silence. This does not mean drowning inside painful emotions. Awareness creates relationship instead of identification. You begin seeing sorrow as an experience moving through consciousness, not as your permanent identity. Like weather passing through open sky. Emotions become easier to hold when they are no longer treated as personal failures. And often, in the very center of acknowledged suffering, tenderness begins appearing, compassion for yourself, compassion for others carrying invisible pain, compassion born not from superiority, but from recognizing the shared vulnerability of being human. When the hands begin speaking, sometimes the mind cannot explain what the heart is carrying. Words feel too small for grief, fear, confusion, or longing. The Buddha's path has always understood that awakening is not limited to thinking clearly. The body itself also participates in healing. Across Buddhist cultures, art became a way of meeting suffering with awareness instead of avoidance. A monk slowly paints calligraphy, each brushstroke reflecting impermanence. A sand mandala is created carefully for days, only to be swept away, teaching the hands themselves that nothing can be held forever. These practices are not performances, they are forms of attention, ways of allowing inner experience to move into visible form. You may discover the same thing in ordinary life. Writing honestly in a notebook late at night, rearranging flowers quietly after loss, humming softly while washing dishes because the nervous system needs gentleness more than explanation. When suffering is given shape, it becomes easier to meet. A vague heaviness turns into a poem, a drawing, a ritual, a conversation, a prayer without words. The Buddha's teaching on impermanence becomes tangible here. What feels unbearable inside the mind often begins shifting once it is allowed to move outward. The hands understand something the thinking mind forgets. Healing does not always arrive through solving. Sometimes it arrives through expression, through allowing truth to breathe instead of remaining trapped behind silence. Beauty that does not last. What is created with awareness does not need permanence to hold meaning. One of the most beautiful aspects of Buddhist art is that much of it is intentionally temporary. Sand mandalas disappear, incense burns away, chanted prayers dissolve into silence. The Buddha understood that clinging even to beauty creates suffering when impermanence inevitably arrives. This teaching can feel difficult because the human heart naturally wants to preserve meaningful experiences forever. You may wish certain conversations lasted longer, certain seasons of life, certain people. Yet the attempt to freeze life often creates more pain than change itself. Impermanence becomes easier to accept when you begin seeing that meaning does not depend on duration. A sunset lasts only minutes. Childhood passes quickly. Even entire lives move like brief waves across time. Yet their temporary nature is precisely what makes them precious. The same becomes true for your own expressions of healing. A journal entry written during grief may never be read again. Yet it still transformed something inside you. A ritual performed privately may leave no visible trace, yet it softened the heart. The Buddha's teaching appears here quietly. What matters most is not possession, but presence. And strangely, once the mind stops demanding permanence, appreciation deepens. You begin meeting moments more fully because you no longer assume they will stay. Like holding water gently instead of gripping it tightly. Awareness learns how to love without trying to imprison experience. The courage to create. There are moments when pain makes you want to disappear inwardly. The body becomes heavy, the future feels distant, even simple tasks require effort. During such times, the Buddha's path does not demand perfection. It simply asks for sincerity, one honest breath, one truthful moment, one small act of presence. This is why creative expression can become deeply healing during hardship. Not because it erases suffering, but because it transforms passive pain into conscious relationship. Instead of remaining trapped inside emotion, you begin participating with it. Perhaps you write a letter you never sent. Perhaps you sit quietly and light a candle each morning for someone you lost. Perhaps you cook carefully for another person while your own heart still aches. These gestures may seem small, yet they interrupt despair's tendency to close the heart completely. The Buddha taught that awareness itself is compassionate when fully present. Creation becomes an extension of that compassion. You stop asking whether your expression is impressive enough and begin asking whether it is true. The nervous system relaxes when truth no longer needs disguise. And gradually, something changes in your relationship with suffering. You stop fearing every painful emotion as an enemy. You begin seeing that even grief contains movement, texture, energy, and transformation. Nothing remains fixed for long. Even heartbreak breathes. The 6 quiet strengths. The Buddha understood that difficult times require more than comforting ideas. They require qualities that can actually carry the heart through uncertainty. Across Buddhist traditions, 6 inner strengths were described again and again. Not as distant ideals, but as practical ways of meeting life when the ground feels unstable. The first is generosity. Fear closes the hand, but generosity opens it gently. Sometimes generosity means offering money or food. Other times it means offering attention, patience, or simple presence to someone struggling beside you. The second is integrity. In painful moments, desperation can tempt people away from their deeper values. Yet honesty protects something essential inside the heart. Even when life feels chaotic, dignity remains possible. The third is patience. Not passive waiting, but the strength to stay present while life unfolds at its own pace. The Buddha saw clearly that many forms of suffering cannot be rushed away. Patience teaches the nervous system how to remain steady during uncertainty. The fourth is wholehearted energy. Not frantic productivity, but the willingness to remain engaged with life instead of collapsing into numbness. The fifth is meditation, the practice of returning again and again to direct experience rather than drowning inside fearful stories. And the sixth is wisdom itself, the quiet recognition that clinging creates suffering while awareness creates space. Together, these qualities form an inner compass. They do not remove difficulty from life, but they help you move through difficulty without losing yourself. Walking through the storm. Sometimes healing begins not through escaping sorrow, but through walking gently beside it. There are seasons when sitting still with grief feels impossible. The body becomes restless beneath the weight of unspoken emotion. Thoughts circle endlessly, sleep grows shallow. The Buddha understood that healing must include the body as well as the mind. This is why walking meditation became such an important practice. Not exercise, not distraction, simply walking with awareness. Feeling each foot touch the earth. Feeling breath move through the chest. Allowing sorrow to travel through the body instead of remaining frozen inside it. Grief often lives physically before it becomes conscious mentally. tight shoulders, a clenched jaw, exhausted limbs. Walking slowly with attention begins loosening what fear has tightened. The earth receives some of the weight the heart has been carrying alone. You may notice this during difficult days. A slow walk at dawn changes something words could not explain. Thoughts still appear, but they lose some of their authority. The rhythm of movement reminds the nervous system that life continues one step at a time. The Buddhist teaching becomes deeply practical here. You do not need to solve your entire future while walking. You only need to feel this step fully, then the next one, then the next. Awareness shrinks suffering back down to the size of the present moment where it can finally be held. The wisdom hidden in ordinary moments. Awakening is often imagined as something dramatic or distant, available only through extraordinary spiritual achievement. Yet the Buddha continually pointed people back toward ordinary experience. Washing a bowl carefully, listening fully to another person, feeling the breath while waiting in traffic. The sacred quietly hides inside the familiar. The craving mind constantly searches for more significant moments, more certainty, more transformation. But wisdom frequently appears through simple attention to what is already here. A parent watching a sleeping child, an elderly person sitting peacefully near a window, a worker pausing before responding harshly during stress. These moments seem small, yet they reshape consciousness gradually. The Buddha understood that the quality of awareness brought into ordinary life matters more than dramatic spiritual performances. Even silence changes when fully inhabited. You begin noticing how much suffering comes from resisting simple reality. Rain falls and the mind complains. Plans change and irritation rises. Aging appears and fear tightens around the body. Yet when awareness softens resistance, life becomes strangely workable again. Not because circumstances suddenly become ideal, but because the heart stops demanding permanence from temporary things. Like trees bending with strong wind instead of snapping against it. Flexibility becomes a form of intelligence. The Buddha's path is filled with this quiet practicality. Wisdom woven directly into everyday living. No longer chasing completion. There comes a point when you begin recognizing the difference between healthy movement and endless chasing. One feels grounded, the other feels desperate. The Buddha never asked people to abandon life. He simply invited them to stop searching for permanent completion inside changing conditions. You may still pursue meaningful work, relationships, creativity, and care for the future, but inwardly, something relaxes. The nervous system no longer believes every moment must produce fulfillment. There is more room for uncertainty, more room for silence, more room for things to unfold naturally. This changes how you experience time itself. Instead of treating life as a constant race toward arrival, moments become more inhabitable. Waiting in line becomes an opportunity to breathe. Conflict becomes an opportunity to listen. Even disappointment becomes a teacher revealing hidden attachment. The hungry ghost gradually weakens whenever awareness replaces automatic grasping. You stop feeding every impulse immediately. You stop believing every anxious thought deserves obedience. The Buddhist teaching begins feeling less like philosophy and more like a lived rhythm inside the body. And perhaps most importantly, compassion deepens. Once you understand your own craving mind, it becomes easier to forgive others for theirs. Everyone is carrying invisible fears. Everyone is searching for safety in imperfect ways. Awareness softens judgment because it reveals how deeply human this struggle truly is. The quiet freedom of enough. Freedom appears when the heart stops demanding that life become different before peace is allowed. In the end, the Buddha's path returns again and again to simplicity. Not simplistic answers, but direct seeing. Craving creates contraction. Awareness creates space. Resistance creates suffering. Presence creates gentleness. Life continues changing either way. You begin understanding that freedom does not arrive through controlling every outcome. It appears through relationship. Through meeting experience without so much grasping and fear. Through recognizing that awareness itself remains steady even while emotions, circumstances, identities, and seasons continue moving. The hungry ghost loses its power gradually. Not through violence or suppression, but through understanding. You pause before chasing the next distraction. You breathe before reacting from fear. You notice beauty without needing to possess it. And slowly, the nervous system learns something profound. Nothing essential was ever truly missing. This realization does not remove grief from human life. It does not prevent loss, uncertainty, aging, or change. But it transforms how these experiences are carried. The heart becomes less frightened of impermanence because it no longer expects permanence from the world. And in that softening, a quiet freedom begins emerging. A freedom rooted not in escape, but in participation. Not in perfection, but in awareness. Like open sky allowing weather to pass through without resistance, the mind learns how to hold life gently. This is Buddha Reflections, where philosophy, insight, and lived experience meet to explore mind, impermanence, and release. The conversation doesn't end here. Visit the quiz tab and share your score in the comments. Thanks for your time, it's been a delight. What should we explore next? Comment, share, and save your insight. Subscribe to Orbital Dharma and keep your thoughts bright.